Hi. All right. So, series of sessions looking at the different features of the hand by looking at the hand shapes. The hand shape is the most important thing to be considering initially when you look at a hand, because the hand shape basically is the context in which everything else that you see in the hand takes place. So we need to look at the hand shape and what that tells us about the person to kind of get a foundation for the rest of the analysis that we're going to do on the hands. Now, the problem with hand shapes is there has been an enormous difficulty about how to classify hand shapes. There are really only 4 systems of hand shape classification that are being used, and 3 of those are absolutely hopeless. And unfortunately, most hand readers will have copied either the Darpontigny system or the William Benham system, and have continued to use those since they were first innovated in the 1830s and 1840s. So Darpontigny was the French writer in the beginning of the middle of the 19th century, who is often credited with bringing handreading back into the fore. His concern was to actually create a classification system of the hands, and he used the observations about the fingers and the fingertip shapes and the knottiness of the joints. I'll just grab a screenshot so I can show you the system that he developed. And basically, he developed a system that basically was a way of trying to classify the different hands that he encountered when he was looking to work out a way in which the patterns of hands that he noticed could be put together into some kind of system. And he developed a 7-fold hand shape classification system. As you can see from this crude diagram here, the tip shapes were important, whether they were conic, spatula, or square. The quality of the fingers were important, whether they were knotty or smooth. And then he developed a 6th type, which was the elementary type, which was for basic and fundamental hands. And unfortunately, this system didn't really work particularly well. So he actually had a 7th type, which he called the mixed hand. And the mixed hand was basically every other hand that didn't fall into these main categories. And as you can see from looking at that typology, 3 of the types are based around the fingertip shapes, 2 of the types are based around the shape of the fingers, 1's just random, and it's not particularly a system at all. Unfortunately, this is the system that's been adopted by most palmists since the 19th century. And you find it replicated again and again and again in palmistry books. And it's an absolutely completely flawed system, as in fact his admission that most hands fall into the mixed type clearly indicates. And there's one thing that most people don't know about Darpontigny's system, because they haven't read the book, La Chirological of 1839, or even Edward Heron Allen's translation of that book, The Science of the Hand, which came out much later, which is to say that Darpontigny's system for classifying the hand shapes was only for the use for the hands of men, not for the hands of women. And clearly, most of the time when we're reading hands, mostly we get more to read the hands more of women than we do of men. So this system is actually, even by its own author, not to be used to analyze the hands of women. The other most common other system was developed around that time was by a guy called Gustav Carus, who was a German physician, and he wrote a book in 1846 that developed a hand shape classification system based around whether the hand was prehensile or a touch type. And he came up with the elementary, the motoric, the sensory. And he basically came up with his system to basically look at the form and function of the hand. Again, it's not a particularly workable system. The only person who adopted it was Charlotte Wolff. And I guess because she was German, because she was a scientist, she wanted to have a sort of a kind of an established scientific method for classifying the hand as the basis of her work. But no one else has really particularly used this system. And then the third initial classification system was developed by William Benham in his work, The Laws of Scientific Handreading of 1900. And he developed a system based around the fleshiness of the palm, the mounts. And he said that we have to look at the mounts and how raised they are, and the bigger the mount, that will show you that that's the type of person that they are. And he's looking at the 4 digital mounts and then the 2 mounts on the palm. And clearly, there's a problem there, because the ball of the thumb is always going to be the biggest mount area in the entire hand. And many of the mounts actually aren't raised at all. They're actually hollows, as you can obviously see from the Saturn mount there. And in fact, Benham even says actually to have a flat or dipped mount of Saturn is really good. So it's a very difficult system to work, because the areas of the mounts are different sizes. And so therefore, how do you quantify which one is bigger or stronger than the other? And as Andrew Fitzherbert quite rightly says, many of the times the mounts are not there at all, and they're just flat. So it's an extraordinary thing that he used that system, and then he went on to develop a second book where he just did vocational analysis from the mounts of the hand. And it's an entirely unworkable system. So, but there is this connection between astrology and hand reading, and people who think that that's important will seem to stick with that, because it gives an astrological symbolism in the hand, which, as I showed before, when they initially talked about the astrology in the hand, they didn't put it on those areas of the hand anyway. So it's completely made up 19th century nonsense, and it's completely ineffective as a handshake classification system, and really not worth investing any time and energy into if you want to learn how to read hands effectively. So what do we need to do then? Well, the best person to look at really initially to start off with is Fred Gettings in his The Book of the Hand of 1965. He is the first author to develop the elemental handshape classification that's widely used by the most prominent hand readers in modern times. Andrew Fitzherbert uses it, Johnny Fincham uses it, Richard Unger uses it. So you've got a very broad base of hand readers, different approaches, who are using this because it's a simple system and it has a powerful explanatory value. The system is basically developed around the shape of the palm and the proportional length of fingers. So the hand, you can see quite clearly, is divided into the palm and the fingers. The palm represents the physicality of the human being, the body, and the fingers represent the mind. So what you got there is a kind of description of the mind-body balance of a person. And the palm itself can be either square or rectangular. The fingers are either short or long in relationship to the palm. And if you read Fred Gettings' book, pages 23 to 75, you will find a detailed exposition of the 4 elemental handshape types and their significances and meanings. So he was the first person to develop that system, and it is a very potent language for describing the hand that he invokes. And when one understands the elements in a very deep and profound way, one comes to see the significant implications of these different handshape types with regard to the life and expression, the physical health, the work and vocations that people will choose, and their psychology and their temperament as well. One thing that's absolutely fundamental to understand about the handshape is that the handshape type is a genetic factor. So the hands should be proportional to the physical body of the person. So if someone is a very large and broad person, they will have large, broad hands. If they're a small, thin person or a tall, thin person, they'll have long, thin hands. So you can kind of see something of the physical shape of the person just by looking at the handprint or the shape of the hands of the person that's in front of you. And these things should correlate together. And when I say the genetics, I don't just mean the genetics of the physical body in the sense that your hands will look something like the hands of your parents, possibly even the hands of your grandparents. But the hands are also a reflection of the ethnicity and the genetics of the culture to which you belong to as well. So here in New Zealand, we have a lot of Tongans and Samoans in this country who are all very, very large men, very large people, very broad-shouldered, very tall, and they have absolutely massive, strong hands. And whereas other parts of the world, you have small, slight people like in India, and you'll have small, waif-like, delicate hands in those parts of the world. So the hand shape is a genetic component. It is culturally and ethnically distributed, and it will say something about the essential values that a person has and the essential orientation that they have to the world. The hand shape is the mode of expression in the world. And if you understand the elemental significance of the hand, then you will actually understand the primary element that's driving that person and the primary way in which they seek to express themselves in the world. So the hand shape is the first thing to get right. And if you want to look at that, to the origins of that idea, look at Fred Getting's book, The Book of the Hand, and have a good read of that. And we will discuss this further as we go through this series. So that's hand shapes. Okay, first thing to start with when you're looking at hands is the shape and the form and the function of the hand. And that'll tell you something that's very, very fundamental and key to that person and how they live their life. All right, so that's all for today. The next one, we'll be moving on. We'll go through this whole series. It's going to be about 10 sessions on the different features of the hand. By the end of it all, you'll have a good overview of what each of the different features of the hands can reveal. I'll see you next time.